In this page, we will study about a negative interrogative clause. The speaker who assures that the definition of the verb is true emphasizes the definition of the verb with the adverb not to describe the modal verb did, do, does, or will, or the be verb to start the interrogative clause. The speaker who considers that the actualization of the definition that the verb delivers is obvious. So, the speaker may clarify this assurance with the application of the adverb not, so we can understand that the adverb not is applied as an emphasis for the definition of the verb to be actualized or actualized.
Very obviously.
There is a clause, isn't she healthy? The speaker assures the fact that the condition of the subject is able to be described by the adjective healthy. The speaker may convey the intent that there cannot be any possibility that she is sick. So, the speaker may apply the adverb not to emphasize the definition of the be verb and ask the agreement from the listeners. The speaker may expect that the listeners may consent on the statement. That is stated in the positive statement.
Is she healthy?
The speaker constitutes the interrogative clause with the adverb not, who assures that the condition of the subject described by the subjective complement healthy is true. So the speaker intends to empower the assurance with the agreement from the listeners. We will study about the way to respond to the negative interrogative clause. So the response to this interrogative clause signifies whether the definition of the verb without the emphasis by the adverb not is true or not. There are two responses with the declaration by yes or no. Yes, she is. No, she isn't. The be verb is a proverb to replace the predicate of the interrogative clause is healthy. Yes, she is. This response confirms the condition of the subject accorded with the positive interrogative clause. So we can consider that the adjective healthy is abbreviated. Yes, she's healthy. So we can understand that the response yes reveals the consent on the positive statement of the interrogative clause spoken by the speaker,
who didn't consider the effect of the description by the adverb not as an emphasis.
No, she isn't. This response denies the condition of the subject accorded with the positive interrogative clause.
Is she healthy?
So we can understand that the adjective healthy is abbreviated, and we can also understand that the response no is the denial to the definition of the be verb is in the interrogative clause stated by speaker we also understand that we do not consider the effect of the denial by the adverb not when the listeners respond to the negative interrogative clause. In the same way, the speaker can ask the listeners whether the listeners agree
On the fact that
the intent of the speaker
is
emphasized by the appended interrogative clause.
that is following the original statement.
The speaker can ask the listeners whether the listeners agree on the intent of the interrogative clause because the speaker assures that the listeners may consent on the intent delivered by the declarative statement
That the effect of the description by the adverb not is not considered because the listeners recognize that the speaker applies the appended clause to emphasize the intent of the speaker, as well as the application of the adverb not.
in the application of the appended clause.
Following the declarative statement that can be either positive or negative,
We can understand that the application of the adverb not is also able to be understood as an emphasis to reveal that the speaker is very assured of
the experience, condition, or action described by the verb applied in the declarative statement as truth.
An appended interrogative clause is stated by the speaker to ensure that there is not a different opinion to the original statement from the listeners. The appended interrogative clause conveys the intention of the speaker to emphasize the original statement, so the listeners respond to the speaker with yes or no according to the definition of the verb applied in the original statement. There is a declarative statement and the appended interrogative clause. She left her house, didn't she? The speaker is very assured to the actualization of
The action described by
the verb left. So, we can understand that the speaker emphasizes the actualization described by the transitive verb left with the appended interrogative clause. The speaker applies the appended interrogative clause, didn't she, to affirm the definition of the transitive verb left in the original statement. There are two responses responded with yes or no. Yes, she did. No, she didn't. The first response with yes is stated in this way, and we can consider the abbreviation of the transitive verb leave and the object of the transitive verb.
According to the declarative statement, stated in the positive way.
Yes, she did leave her house. So we can understand that the response yes is accorded to the declarative statement spoken by the speaker. The listeners respond to reveal that the definition of the transitive verb left applied in the original statement is true. The abbreviated predicate, leave her house, reveals the detailed intent conveyed by the response. The second response is this: no, she didn't leave her house. The listeners respond to reveal that the definition of the transitive verb left applied in the original statement is false. We can understand that the speaker responds with no according to the declarative statement. She left her house. We can understand that the appended clause reveals the intent of the speaker to emphasize the intent of the speaker delivered in the declarative statement. She left her house, the original statement. The definition of the verb applied in the original statement determines whether the listeners respond with yes or no. The second clause is stated in the negative statement, and the appended interrogative clause is stated without the adverb not. The listeners who hear these clauses recognize that the speaker intends to emphasize the definition of the transitive verb
Leave
described by the modal verb did
with the consideration for the description by the adverb not as an emphasis.
We can also understand that the adverb not in the statement emphasized by the appended clause is applied to emphasize the intent of the speaker stated in the positive statement.
From the perspective of the listeners who heard the declarative statement stated in the negative way and the appended clause as well.
The speaker states the original statement as the negative clause with the adverb not to emphasize the emphasis by the modal verb did for the definition of the transitive verb leave. After the listeners hear the two clauses, the listeners understand that the speaker
delivers the intent in this way. There cannot be a possibility that he left his house. He must stay in his house.
The appended interrogative clause conveys the intent of the speaker to affirm that the definition of the transitive verb leave applied in the original statement is
false.
There are two responses.
The first response is this.
Yes, he did. The second response is this. No, he didn't. The first response
as the affirmation
can be understood with the abbreviated part, leave his house. The listeners respond to affirm that the definition of the transitive verb leave applied in the original statement is true with the response yes. We can understand that the response yes is accorded with the declarative statement interpreted into the positive way with the consideration that the appended clause is applied to emphasize the intent of the speaker.
The speaker couldn't believe in the fact that the subject actualized the definition of the transitive verb left denied by the adverb not. So the speaker might want to hear from the listeners who clarify whether the subject he actualized the definition of the transitive verb left denied by the adverb not.
The abbreviated predicate leave his house reveals the detailed intent of the speaker.
Of this response, the listeners who consider the emphasis by the adverb not as the less prioritized information respond with a positive statement spoken by the speaker in both interrogative clauses, the negative interrogative clause and the appended clause.
The second response is started with the response no. This can be understood with the fact that the listeners reveal this agreement to the declarative statement interpreted into the positive way with the consideration that the appended clause reveals
that the application of the adverb not delivers the emphasis of the speaker.
We can understand this response by the listeners with the abbreviated part. No, he didn't leave his house. The listeners respond to reveal that the definition of the transitive verb leave applied in the original statement is false with a response no. The abbreviated predicate reveals the detailed intent of the listeners. We can also understand that the emphasis by the adverb not in the negative interrogative clause and a clause emphasized by the appended clause, the adverb not is applied as an emphasis
to reveal
the assurance of the speaker in the positive statement. So we can also understand that the listeners who respond to the interrogative clause of the speaker respond regardless of the effect of the adverb not and just respond to the positive statement of the speaker who delivers the interrogative intent in the clause. Thank you for watching.